Let's move from Wally to Charles Pellegrin with the business bulletin now. We're going to head to Beijing, aren't we, Charles? There's no connection at all.
Some people have said they look like him, but...
Oh, there you go. You see, just need a little hat. Anyway, the country's premier in China has presented the government's work report on 2024, outlining economic objectives and underlining the many challenges that China is facing. Here you go, then.
Yeah, the speech takes place every year. So it's interesting to see how it evolves each time. The interesting thing this time around is that the objectives are almost exactly the same they were last year, which underlines China's struggles, especially as many of those objectives weren't reached in 2023. At least some of these objectives weren't reached. After years of double-digit growth, China's economy has entered a new phase in which growth rates are slowing down. Just like last year, the goal is to reach 5% of GDP growth in 2024, and we shouldn't expect massive stimulus to boost growth either, as the government is aiming for the same deficit ratio target as last year at 3% of deficit to GDP ratio. When it comes to jobs and unemployment, the goal is to create 12 million new urban jobs and get the jobless rate to 5.5%, same targets as last year, where these goals were reached or even surpassed. And reaching 3% of consumer inflation will be more of a challenge, though. With the same target last year, the country actually went through deflation, with prices down 0.3% annually at the end of 2023, a phenomenon due to a drop in domestic spending, which the premier alluded to in his speech. Let's take a listen.
The complexity, severity, and uncertainty of the external environment are increasing. The foundation for China's sustained economic recovery is not yet stable, with insufficient effective demand, overcapacity in some industries, weak social expectations, and still many risks and hidden dangers.
Yeah, one of the main drags, Charles, on the Chinese economy has been the real estate sector, hasn't it?
The sector represents as much as 20% of the whole of China's economy, of China's GDP, according to the International Monetary Fund. And economists at Nomura estimate that a total real estate revenue in 2023 dropped 63% compared to 2 years earlier, totaling 3.2 trillion yuan, or about 410 billion euros. The sector's been going through a slump since 2020, when new regulations were ushered in by the government to rein in what it considered to be unhealthy speculation and to set limits on lending to real estate companies. Groups like Evergrande and Country Garden that used to rely on cheap funding to keep projects sprouting all over the country were then hit with a cash crunch and are now struggling to repay their debts. Evergrande was ordered to liquidate its assets by a Hong Kong court in January. And perhaps as a sign that this crackdown is maybe nearing its end, the Premier's speech today, for the first time since 2019, didn't include Xi Jinping's maxim on real estate and property, which is houses are for living in, not for speculation. But saying that this will actually lead to a rebound in China's property sector is also just that, speculation.
Let's move to the stock markets then, Charles. Have they reacted to this report at all?
Yes, absolutely. Mainland Chinese stock markets, as you see on the Asian marketplaces, hit actually over a 3-month high on the back of that report. We're seeing the Shanghai Composite close the session just over 0.25% higher. Elsewhere, though, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong leading the losses in the region. And in Europe, meanwhile, at the open, we're seeing markets in negative territory. The main factor there is that investors are eyeing the European Central Bank's meeting later in the week, where it's expected to keep interest rates steady, although inflation is showing signs of easing.
Okay, let's pivot away from China now. Australia is rolling out a new investment fund. It's aimed at boosting its economic ties with its Southeast Asian neighbours.
The fund will be valued at roughly $1.3 billion US. It was announced during a summit of the ASEAN Forum of Southeast Asian Nations in Melbourne. It comes as Canberra is seeking to reduce Australia's economic reliance on China after a series of disputes that have led to trade restrictions on Australian exports. Bryan Quinn has the details.
Welcome to Melbourne. Thank you very much.
Calling it the most significant upgrade to economic relations in a generation, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese unveiled a new fund on Tuesday aimed at boosting trade with the ASEAN group of Southeast Asian nations.
The government that I lead has made it very clear. More than any other region, Southeast Asia is where Australia's future lies.
The Southeast Asia Investment Financing Facility, valued at $1.3 billion will be aimed largely at infrastructure and green energy projects. Its announcement comes amid a 3-day ASEAN summit in Melbourne. The 10-nation group includes Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand. Nearly 650 million people with a combined GDP of some $2.9 trillion. Australia's two-way trade with ASEAN topped $115 billion in 2022, second only to its trade with China, valued at roughly $206 billion. The new fund is yet another bid by Canberra to diversify Australia's economy away from reliance on China, after a series of damaging political disputes have resulted in what many have called a full-blown trade war.
Our position on China remains very consistent, which is that we want to cooperate where we can, we'll disagree where we must, but we will always engage in our national interest.
The fund's focus on green energy represents an effort by both Australia and ASEAN to turn away from fossil fuels. Southeast Asia's growing population has a growing appetite for electricity, mostly powered by coal and gas, both of which Australia is one of the world's top exporters.
A crucial part of the world economy, Southeast Asia.
Thanks very much, Shel Pellegrin, with the business news here on France 24.